This week, we've seen food truck fiascos, a new hierarchy amongst the gods, and a message to the world to rise up against tyranny. Let's dive right into what's on the pull list. Jumping right in, we're going to start with Absolute Flash number 9, written by Jeff Lemire with artwork by Nick Robles. So in this one, Wally is kind of like stuck between two different worlds, and he's kind of forced into teaming up with the rogues who have been hired to track him down and bring him back to the lab that his father was working for. But he kind of finds out that there may be a traitor amongst them. So we slow down in this one yet again, and that's been my biggest struggle with this series is that it is a book about Flash, and it feels like this thing is just like a slog to get through. It is a really slow, meandering kind of story that it's an explainer issue essentially, right? I mean, this is exactly what we're getting is that we're kind of like learning why Wally is the key to opening the gates and what's the machinations of this lab truly are. And it just it's good to get that information, but the pacing of this series has been so frustratingly slow. Nick Robles is back though, and the book looks good. It does feel like we need him more consistently on the book, but I guess I need to take what I can get when I get it here. The one positive I do have, though, is I really love the way that he renders the timey-wimey aspects of the Speed Force and how Wally interacts with that speed. Absolute Flash, though, overall as an experience, it's not giving me good as much as I need it to. All right, it's time to talk about the much hyped DC Marvel Batman Deadpool number 1 with a variety of writers and artists. This is a difficult book to review, and we kind of got this experience when we did the Deadpool Batman crossover that was primarily Marvel driven. This is the DC version of it, and the primary story is written by Grant Morrison with artwork by Dan Mora. And I feel like this is maybe a better way to review it by answering some questions on what this book is as opposed to maybe what happens in it. So the primary story, like I said, is written by Grant Morrison. And is this better than the Marvel entry that was written by Zeb Wells? Yes. Is it a noteworthy Morrison entry into the hierarchy of all of their work? No. Is it the best version of what is ultimately like an inconsequential comic? Yes. Will we be talking about this for like years and years to come as a hallmark? No. Did it have an interesting callback to prior works of Grant Morrison, like the inclusion of Cassandra Nova and some of the fourth wall breaking of Animal Man? Yes. But at the end of the day, was this book good? All right, let's talk Everything Dead and Dying number 3, written by Tate Bromble with artwork by Jacob Phillips. So Jack is holding one of the survivors captive as his zombie husband was just killed by this roaming band of humans, or killed, if you will. The story and what I feel like makes this book work so far is that it leans into the emotional trauma without needing the bombast that we generally get from zombie pieces of fiction. There's like a heartbeat to it, right? And I think that what sets this apart is that Jack's reaction to the circumstances, that's what really is driving the story because he is a man that is driven, a man that is devoted and motivated by keeping his town running and keeping his family unit, albeit very changed by the zombie outbreak, moving forward and kind of staying in that mode of where it was. While I'm reminiscing on old zombie stories, this just feels different and I like that about it because it needs to be different. We can't just have this be a Walking Dead clone because it'll die on the vine if that's the case. We've had enough zombie fiction that there's a lot of things that have already been explored here, and I think if they keep the things moving forward the way that they are right now, I think that this could define itself as being different enough to make it to keep that curiosity going and keep my interest, at a very high level. But there has to be emotional stakes and there has to be, that heartbeat behind the story. That's what I'm looking for. If they can keep that pace up, I'm going to be along for the ride. All right, let's talk Ghost Pepper number 5, written and drawn by Ludo Lullaby. Laloy and her crew kind of are returning to home base and they're licking their wounds after having that huge fight with the other vendor of the other food truck, and they're there to fix their truck as well. This was an all right issue. I really enjoyed the last issue. There was a lot of action, there was a lot of humor. It really ramped everything up, and I feel like that was a very strong point in the series so far. But here we get no big revelations, we get no big stakes. It's a really chill issue about getting back to square one. Ludo has a good sense of storytelling in here, visually and narratively, but I really wish we got to showcase the action more often. Like, I feel like this is not the kind of book where we should have the opportunity to sit back and relax. I mean, we got to keep our pedal to the metal here. That's what makes this book so fun, with the artistic qualities that he brings to it. I need that fun, I need that humor, and I need that action. And while this was an okay issue, it really did ramp everything down as we kind of had to, I don't know, like level set a little bit. And that's okay, but I wanted a little bit more out of this one. Next up, we have High Strangeness #2, written by Zach Thompson with artwork by Noah Bailey. So we have a prison transport that basically goes astray. The bus crashes, and there's a couple inmates who were having a conversation about what would you do if you ever had the chance to run. And now we get to see what does happen when they get the chance to run. The only problem is they're confronted with a Sasquatch. This was a really fun issue. I felt that it was more concise and more a direct narrative than the first issue that we got from this series. And I have to say, I really enjoyed that first issue. This was just a little bit more compelling for the narrative aspect of it. And I feel like we got to really follow a main character through the storyline and kind of saw all of the ticks, right? There was a little bit of remorse behind this criminal. I enjoyed the visual aesthetic here, as well as they had to convey the mythical qualities of this beast that that we all have heard about, and kind of like all kind of lived under the notion of like, ooh, what if this thing actually exists? I love that we get kind of like an explainer a little bit of how it's remained hidden from society, and all of the ideas and all of the things that have taken place here that has allowed it to kind of remain hidden from our sight, and maybe how it influences humanity as well. High Strangeness has been really fun. This issue definitely takes it up a notch. Next up, we have Lost Fantasy #5, written by Kurt Pierres with artwork by Maxi Dalio. So we have a murder and we have a will, but that is going to have to wait a little bit because Henry is now searching for his father, who could possibly be the victim. This is a really brisk read for an extra-sized issue. I feel like Pierre's really lets this book breathe for the artistic qualities to really shine through. Now, the problem is that Luca Casalegüeda, the artist that we've had for previous issues, is not here. So the art that we get, it's okay, but I kind of miss Luca on here a little bit. I kind of needed that. Now, the other cool thing about this is that it acts as a catalyst for a possible spin-off series for Lost Fantasy, where we're going to explore another character, another mythological quality to this underground world where these beings come from. And that could be pretty cool. I hope that this world doesn't get bogged down into the minutia of having just too much too soon, though. Time will tell on this. This is the jumpstart of another arc in the series. So I had a lot of fun with this. It's setting the stones for the story to take place. I want to see where it goes from here, though. All right, let's talk The New Gods #12, written by Ram V with artwork by Evan Cagle and Phil Hester. So we finally reached the finale of this series here, and the new god child is thrust into the void by Maxwell Lord, and he's starting to feel Darkseid's influence as he's getting closer and closer. And Darkseid is trying to basically manipulate and maybe take control of this new god being. I'll be honest, this felt a little bit hand wavy as far as resolutions go for this series. I feel like we had like 3 issues previously that were like stretched way out, that really bogged the story down. And I kind of wish that those 3 issues were the ones that got smashed together, and that we took this finale and stretched it out over 3 issues and really gave it room to breathe. I feel like that would have made it a much more enriching experience, because some of the resolutions and some of the things that happen in here to tie up all the loose ends, they happen very quickly, and they don't necessarily happen with a lot of explanation behind it as to how they're happening and why they're happening. But there is a heartbeat of this series, though, and I really feel like that is the relationship between Highfather and Mr. Miracle, and Highfather and Orion and Mr. Miracle. I feel like there's a trifecta there that's happening that gets changed a little bit at the culmination of this series. We do get the promise that this could continue into another thing, a new iteration. I feel like the landscape has definitely changed for New Gods. This, I feel like, was has definitely been better than the previous couple issues. In regards to a finale, though, it did leave me wanting a little bit more. All right, let's talk No Man's Land number 3, written and drawn by Simon Kudransky. So, as our investigation continues, the implications of the findings that our two agents have, they start to become a little bit more clear, but the alliance between those agents maybe becomes a little bit muddier. This was an excellent issue that really escalates everything. We're only incrementally moving closer to any answers, right? And moving that plot forward. But I feel like we got to spend a lot of time with these agents and kind of just grasping the investigatory part of the story, which I really appreciated. I feel like that was a really strong part of this issue. But the killer now is way closer to our protagonist as we learn kind of towards the latter half of this issue. The lack of color here, I have to kind of call out as well because it could be a visual thing that is maybe like a money saving technique, but I don't feel like that's the case here because the landscape of this being the ice bridge between Alaska and Russia, the lack of color makes this book feel so cold and it's so fitting for the landscape that they're playing into. So I really like that the sparseness of color really leans into that idea. When you are reading this, you might want to grab a blanket because you might get a little bit chilly. No Man's Land, though, has been fantastic so far. I feel like issue 3 is kind of keeping the pace and kind of delivering you a little bit of the story and the mystery here and there, but it's kind of keeping that tension at a high pitch level. Next up, we have One World Under Doom, number 9, written by Ryan North with artwork by R.B. Silva. So we saw a big thing happen at the end of the previous issue, and Doom is now trying to rectify that mistake. And it'll ultimately mean that he will need to sacrifice possibly everything. And here we are. We're at the end of this series, and it still has me questioning what was the point of all of this? This issue doesn't do anything to clarify that, unless maybe the message of the series was that, well, the Tin Man actually does have a heart. Wizard of Oz did it better. This is a minor gripe, but it's something that I do need to call out. The artwork in this entire series and this issue, something felt off. I've really enjoyed RB Silva's artwork in the past. He kind of came into prominence in the Krakoa era of X-Men. I believe he did the Powers of 10 part of the series, and it really worked there. But something with the color and his pencils just feel off, and it leaves everything feeling flat, and it feels there's almost like a traced quality of this. The facial expressions on our characters, it feels like something that is very static and it's not kinetic at all. And I wanted something more from that. So the narrative let me down. The artwork kind of let me down. One World Under Doom, let me know what your thoughts were. It kind of didn't do it for me. All right, something that is doing it for me though, let's talk Racer X number 3, written by Mark Russell with artwork by Nuno Plati. So Rex is kind of explaining the ins and outs of a racer's ascension and how Speed is taking his game to the next level while he is watching out for his brother from, I can't even say from the sides, right? Because he's involved in the race, but he's always looking out for this character. This was a big introspective issue for Rex. We get to spend a lot of time in his head. We get to spend a lot of time. We kind of understood his motivations, but we get to spend a lot of time kind of just like having him talk out those motivations. And it was really cool. There was a lot of good setup in this issue. Really, really good artwork in here. I've said it before in the previous 2 issues. I'll say it again here too, though. I like the level of kineticism that we got here, and the character work. I feel like leveled itself up in this issue more so than we got in the previous couple issues. Racer X is a really great companion piece to what we're getting in Speed Racer. It's kind of like the Rashomon between these properties. We get to see the same events from 2 different perspectives, and even though we kind of get the same outcomes, we learn a little bit more from each one of these series, and I'm really enjoying that aspect of it. All right, let's talk Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Casey Jones, number 2, written by Alex Paknadel with artwork by Amansi Nalapan. So Casey is now kind of starting to get healed up here. Not quite, but he's starting to get there, and he's hitting up some of his old stomping grounds to investigate a missing mutant. And he may get stomped in the process of hitting up those old stomping grounds. This one was okay. The mutant hunting leopard is far more interesting a character, I feel, than Casey is right now. And if that's going to be the case, last I checked, this issue was called Casey Jones. So I want him to be, have a spotlight shown on him. I do want interesting villainous characters, don't get me wrong, but I feel like we need to get more in Casey's head, and kind of like, I don't know, find out how is he doing after kind of being in a coma for the longest time and still kind of healing up from everything and still putting himself in danger. I want to find the motivation behind that character, what's driving him right here and right now in the moment. Art wise, this book is solid. It kind of keeps the flow and the ebb and flow of everything, the story moving forward, and I like that about it. It's nothing I'm going to like scream from the mountaintops about, but I think it's doing the job and doing the job concisely. So Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Casey Jones, I'm gonna keep on going with this for a couple more issues. We're gonna see where it goes from here. All right, let's talk the Twilight Zone #2, written and drawn by Tom Scioli. This was an interesting one. A group of spacefaring explorers, they come across this planet that seems to change based on their needs and their thoughts and their experiences and their memories. But we don't know if these changes are happening for good or for bad. Scioli crafts an interesting enough story that plays with the ideas of trauma, but I feel like the classic Twilight Zone stories, they kind of have this zinger to them, right? There's always a twist and there's always something that, if you've watched enough Twilight Zone, you see coming a mile away at this point. But I feel like it's still like an enticing thing. I still want that from a Twilight Zone story, and that zinger is missing here. I feel like what is delivered is very much face value. It's exactly what you would anticipate, and there's no twist. There's no mystery that needs to be solved here. This felt like more of a Tom Scioli book masquerading as a Twilight Zone book than a Twilight Zone book by Tom Scioli, if that makes sense. Don't let that, get twisted though. It was still a worthwhile experience. I still liked it very much. It just felt like it was maybe a step outside of the vein of what I would expect from a Twilight Zone story. Next up, we have The Ultimates #18, written by Dennis Camp with artwork by Juan Frigeri. So in this issue, Tony addresses the world as the Ultimates are preparing for the Maker's return, and he basically hijacks the broadcasting across the world to kind of relay the message of what it means to be an Ultimate and how everyone has a responsibility to be an Ultimate. And if you're there for the battle, this is how you move forward. It's a prep and plan kind of issue, right? Tony's speech to the world is intentionally heavy handed, but that's also what it should be to evoke the hope in the world, where hope is a rare commodity. So I like that it is a little bit hokey and cheesy because let's be honest, that's the way that speeches tend to be. Gary has gotten better and better throughout this entire series. Every single time, I remember seeing his artwork from the very beginning of the series, issues 1 and 2, and kind of side eyeing it a little bit. Well, Juan, you have my sincere apologies. I've enjoyed your artwork through and through, like since that time, and I feel like it's stepped up every single issue that I've gotten. It was a really great progression that we've gotten. Now we know that this is going to be coming to an end very, very soon. So I feel like this is a great way to set up what will eventually become the end of the Ultimate Universe. So the Ultimates #18, it was a really good laying of the foundation for the end. And with my runner-up book of the week, let's talk Space Ghost #5, written by David Pepose with artwork by Jonathan Lau. So we get to see Jan and Jace as they're investigating this attempted coup while Space Ghost is pleading with the existing regimes to not ignite a war between the two being the crystalline armor and the shark beings. Jan and Blip essentially walking into what is equivalent of a Mos Eisley bar, looking like Han Solo and Chewie, was like everything to me. That scene totally slapped. I loved every single thing about it. It was such a loving homage to that kind of storyline, right? The dirty, dusty spacefaring, travelers. I loved how they leaned into that. Jan might be my favorite character in this book, man. I love like the level of heroism that that character has. There's there aren't too many comics that really can successfully give you a solid 1 to 2 issue story arc that feels really good. It feels like it answers all the questions and it feels like you can kind of dust your hands off and move on to whatever the next thing is. This is the kind of series that does that. And these 2 issues here, with the ending being issue #5, This is the kind of arc that did that for me. I loved how concise this was, how the pacing kind of kept everything moving forward at a whip snap pace, but you didn't feel like you were ever missing anything. It was just that it was action packed. All of the events were happening concisely. This was just like a really fantastic action packed science fiction kind of issue. Space Ghost is kind of killing it. And with my top comic of the week, let's talk The Sacrificers number 17, written by Rick Remender with artwork by Max Fiumara. This one was a doozy. This one was such a good issue. Seluna is reunited with her father and the pantheon of the gods in a shocking twist from our last issue. So we saw that basically Seluna was on the verge of death. Her father, Kronos, was on the verge of death. Pidgey was on the verge of death, and she had a choice to make. And now we get to see what that choice was. Remender continues to play with our expectations from arc to arc, issue to issue, panel to panel. And this is the least predictable comic on stands right now. And because of that, it's also one of them to get the most excited over. You never know what to anticipate here. And I gotta say, this issue took me by surprise a couple different times. Fiumara gets to work with some really gasp-worthy scenes that I can't spoil, but just know that they hit, and they hit so freaking hard. The Sacrificers has been one of my favorite series this year. This issue definitely changes the scope of where we're going to be going, but I feel like I've been able to say that a couple times throughout this series. So this is just Rick Remender doing Rick Remender things, and you have to be here for it because it was absolutely worthy of Top Comic of the Week. So that's what I've got for you this week, but I'm more curious. What did you read, and what were your thoughts? Do me a favor, like, share, and subscribe, and be part of the panel. Leave me a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you next week.